Reading through Deuteronomy 28 really got the wheels turning for me because in this chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, God's talking about all the blessings and all of the curses that'll come to the Israelites based off of how they uphold their end of the covenant with Him in the promised land. Well, come to find out that part of the curse of disobedience is going to be that they'll be scattered across the world. They'll no longer be one nation. So immediately I thought of the Tower of Babel because I think most famously in that story, it says that God dispersed all the people. So I finished reading that chapter, but as soon as I got done, because I haven't read the whole Bible, I started Googling stuff because I just don't know where to look. But I wasn't sure even who built the Tower of Babel, and come to find out, it was the Babylonians. Big surprise. And so my next question was, who are the Babylonians? Are they the Israelites? Did they become another nation at some point, or what happened there? And then I discovered that the Babylonians had conquered the Israelites, but they weren't called the Israelites. They were called the Jewish people. So then I was like, well, why were they? When did that happen? Basically, when did their name change? And then I discovered that they were first conquered by the Assyrians. And so at the time, they were still called the Israelites. But the name change happened after they were conquered by the Assyrians because they were people from Judea. And so that's when the name change happened from Israelites to Jewish people. And this is very symbolic of the fact that this is when the covenant with God was broken and destroyed. God told the Israelites from basically the beginning of Genesis that He would bless all of the descendants from Abraham on, which would be the Israelites, with His covenant. But because they broke that, they were no longer the people who had been bestowed that covenant. And by the way, I could be getting all this wrong, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, but I'm just sharing my thoughts. So, I then looked and thought, well, how did they break their covenant? What exactly happened? Because God said that He would defeat their enemies and they would basically prosper forever, right? And then I read that the king at the time of the Israelites, his name was Hosea, and his wife's name was Gomer. And Gomer was a hussy, to put it softly. She was having children with a bunch of other men, and Hosea was prophesizing that the end of Israel, the Israelites, was coming out of near because of their practice of idolatry, and basically they had just completely turned away from God. And sure enough, that's what happened. So at Hosea's reign, that's when they were conquered and the end of the Israelites as we knew them. But obviously, as far as like their descendants and everything, the Jewish people still exist, and it became very apparent to me that the curse from the Old Testament and Deuteronomy is still very present, because just look at everything going on in Israel right now, and the fact that Israel as a nation just ceased to exist for how many thousands of years. And then even upon its reestablishment after the Holocaust, which obviously that was horrible, they've still been under fire and haven't been able to have peace. And one of the curses that Deuteronomy 28 talks about is that they'll never be able to feel safe. They'll always basically be looking over their shoulder. And it goes on, but it was just really interesting to me. And I'd never learned that story before. I never knew the history of the Jewish people and the conversion of Israelites to Jewish people and how all that transpired. So it's pretty cool. It also, by the way, this also kind of like further to me solidifies the evidence that the Bible is true. I mean, every nation of people has kind of gone through ebbs and flows, but the Jewish people, they've been oppressed like since forever. I would say since about 734 BC, right? BC, sorry, when Hosea was the king and they were conquered by the Syrians. So, anyways, read your Bibles, guys. I'm gonna keep reading mine, and we'll find out more. All right, we'll see ya.